The Not-So-Dead. Dusk's story. Written by Isaiyan Morrison. Dusk didn't understand why his old friend wanted to meet in the bar next to the Pioneer Hotel around 7 at night. That part of the city was a hellhole filled with drunkards, prostitutes, and their pimps, and the worst humans of all, gangsters. But it was the kind of environment Niham thrived in. When Dusk received his written letter months ago, he had just left Oklahoma, bound for any town in the deep south, preferably rural. He drove the stolen car like a bat out of hell. He had been stealing and leaving cars behind for a week, trying to put as much distance between himself and the law, who'd chased him night and day because of Tristan. The new wraith had resorted to his old tricks again by robbing First Water's bank in the middle of the day. To make things worse, he killed the sheriff before escaping, on horseback, while shooting his gun and shouting at the town's residents that he was back. Dusk thought Tristan had learned his lesson before. There was no going back to his rugged outlaw life, not as a wraith, but being new to this life and trying to stay on the straight and narrow was easier said than done. He had the tendency to get out of control, which had left Dusk with little choice but to bounce from place to place in search of a permanent home. Now, in Chicago, he took a big risk leaving Tristan alone back in their room at the Pioneer Hotel in the heart of Skid Row. Their small room was only big enough for one bed and a small dresser. Mold grew in the corners of the room, and the wallpaper barely stuck to the dirtied walls. Next door, he heard a man and woman fighting shortly before he left, and as he descended the stairs, he ran into a drunk who wanted to fight him on the street. He hoped that whatever Niham wanted to talk to him about was just as important as he'd stated in his letter, and Dusk didn't expect this little meeting to take any longer than a few hours. "How's your new friend? The wraith you picked up in New Mexico?" Niham sat across from him with his legs crossed, cupping a glass of alcohol in one hand and a cigarette in the other. Wraiths had no use for either, but presenting a false narrative for their true identity helped in hiding what they were. "You know about that?" Dusk asked. "Oh, Dusk, you know how we wraiths love to talk about who did what and when." He sat back in his chair. "He's a lot to handle right now, but he's getting used to things." "I bet he is. You remember how it was for you, don't you?" Dusk didn't want to be reminded. Centuries ago, it was a lot harder to hide than it was in the 1930s America. In fact, it had become easier since the crash of 1929. Now, with the Great Depression near its end, things were beginning to turn back to the way they were, with a few minor differences. "I don't understand why a wraith would turn a human so mindlessly," he thought to himself. "The way Tristan described it to me, it wasn't an accident. You know some wraiths don't have control." Niham waved his cigarette around as he talked. "They just leech here and there, hoping they don't take too much to give birth to another one. But my question is, why would you take one you did not make under your wing? You should have left him to fend for himself, or killed him." "You know I can't do that," he replied. "It's not his fault this happened to him." "Oh, friend, always the righteous one." Niham placed the glass to his lips, and as his blue eyes met Dusk's, he paused. "Do you want a drink?" His silver-colored bangs fell loose from beneath his hat, covering his forehead. Dusk declined. "I didn't come all the way up north to drink or talk about Tristan." He sat up straight in his chair. "You told me you had some new information." "You were always flawless when it came to changing subjects." Niham placed the cup back on the table. "I don't want to be here longer than I have to." "Why not? Chicago is a great city." "It's a cold city. I don't like cold cities." A drunk stumbled into their table, and Dusk watched as Niham stretched his fingers to rub against the human's skin. Dusk envied how good he was at taking essence from unsuspicious humans. He did it with little effort. When the drunk wobbled back to the bar, Niham's eyes fluttered a moment. "I do love the drunk ones. Don't you?" "Niham, Are you going to tell me or what? Dusk nodded in his direction. And you're showing. Red veins spread throughout the underlying skin on Niham's face. Afraid someone will see? He rubbed his skin and the veins retreated. You know I am. Oh, these drunks don't trust their own eyesight. You worry too much. The last time you said not to worry about revealing what we are, I ended up in a cage. Niham brushed off Dusk's comment as if it were nothing. Don't dwell on the past. I don't. Dusk laid his hands on the table. Why did you want me to come here? He asked outright. Niham licked his lips slowly, then replied, You know that pesky little shard I've been trying to find for a few centuries now? He knew. The shard of Anu? You found it? No. With his answer, Dusk rose to his feet. Then I'm done here. But Niham wasn't. He reached out in a flash and held onto Dusk's wrist. I found another one. Another one? How many are there? Sit down and I'll tell you. Dusk took his seat. There are 3 in total, he explained. Niham, you never told me there were 2 more. Dusk replied. Why now? Because one is right here, in Chicago. He took another sip of his drink. Is this one just as dangerous as the shard? As long as Dusk had known Niham, the shard of Anu was Niham's prized possession, a mystical item that he wanted to control and possess by any means. To him, it didn't matter if its magical properties had a horrible effect on wraiths, including possible death. He wanted it, which meant bad news for the person or persons who had it. To us, no. Then why go after it? Why not? His eyes scrutinized Dusk. Having just one gives us an advantage over our enemies. While the one in the city is a little different and not as important as my shard, I'll take what I can get. If it doesn't hurt us, then who does it hurt? Who is it meant for? For the first time in their conversation, Niham lowered his voice. The other ones. The creatures with the black eyes. It was the exact phrase he had used to describe just one of the many other supernatural creatures created from dark magic, like themselves. Demon. Oh, Niham. Dusk rubbed his chin. And what demon are you planning on killing to get it? No one. Yet. Right now, a demon has it, and a certain researcher from the Brotherhood knows exactly where this demon is. Neve spoke about researchers from the Brotherhood often, using profanity and derogatory words to describe them. While he didn't hide from them and often wished for a confrontation, Dusk wanted nothing to do with them. Wherever they were, demon followed, and the thought of running into one made his hands tremble. This is the kind of trouble I don't want. Dusk's gaze darted toward the table. I never understood why you're willing to put your life on the line for some dark magic-infused trinket. The researcher is who I'm after, he said with a hint of deviltry in his eyes. And before you go on a tangent, I just want to add that we won't run into any demon. And how do you know that? They're in every city, in every country on this planet. If it troubles you this much, we can go during the day, he said. Demon aren't partial to sunlight. Or not go at all. Dusk sat back and folded his arms. I want nothing to do with the Brotherhood either. You do not mess with them, Niham. They're only humans. Humans who know how to kill, hurt, and imprison people like us, he replied. They do it to Demon all the time. We aren't Demon. He took another sip of his drink. I can't believe you're afraid of these humans. And I can't believe you aren't. Dusk placed his face in his hands. By being here, I've placed myself and Tristan at risk. He stood from his chair again. I don't want this spilling over. I don't want Tristan caught up in this as well. Bring him with you. I'm dying to meet him anyway. Niham stood as well, and to calm Dusk, he placed his hand on his shoulder. Remember what I told you back in Italy? I told you I would never let anything bad happen to you, not while I am still alive. I will always keep that promise to you and to that other wraith under your wing. While Niham was good at regurgitating what he said centuries ago, he wasn't as good as Dusk when it came to remembering specific dates in their past. This isn't Italy, and this isn't 1796. Dusk brushed his hand away. Napoleon isn't invading America, Niham, and don't forget, you didn't protect me. You left me to save your own skin. I almost died. 5 days in a cell. 5 days. But I came back for you. You're my son. He didn't feel like a son. He felt like a recruit, someone Niham wanted to do his bidding. Being new, he had accepted the responsibility. Niham was the only other wraith he knew, and only together were they able to survive. But he was power-hungry, and the idea of securing just one of the dark magic shards was enough for Dusk to doubt his true intentions. Niham's eyes drew into slits, and his face hardened. You know how important the shard of Anu is to me. This isn't the shard. No, but with it, we will have leverage over both the Brotherhood and Demon. And they will come after you, not me, Dusk argued. Because I won't have anything to do with this. Dusk, please, I can't do this without you. Dusk couldn't look him in the eye. Niham wasn't only his friend. He was the one who made him, the one who turned him, and all wraiths retained a connection to their maker, so to speak. This was no different. When Niham demanded obedience, the wraith inside Dusk strived to remain loyal, regardless of his actions. He wanted to hate him, but he couldn't, and if he refused to help his maker, Nive would go on his own. There was a high chance he wouldn't return unscathed. He exhaled. Yes, I know. He slowly sat back into his chair. Thank you. Niham sat as well. I'll help you get this other item, but after, I'm leaving Chicago with Tristan. I mean it. You will not write to me again. You will not try to look for me again. After this is over, we part ways for good. I understand. So, where is this researcher? His playfulness returned, and Neve nodded. His home is a little way north of the city. I will not help you kill this researcher. Just kidnapping. Dusk pondered for a moment. I'm serious. We will not kill him. Niham appeared unbothered by Dusk's stance. If that's what you want. Yes, that is exactly what I want. While driving, Niham caught Dusk up to speed with the occurring events happening in the city between the Brotherhood and Demon. None of it made sense to Dusk, and after a few moments, he begged for Niham to stop talking about it altogether. Instead, he wanted to know more about what Niham called the Green Amulet. Niham explained that, after several decades of trying to locate the shard, he came across information about this amulet from a researcher who'd made the unlucky decision of crossing his path. The researcher had told him it was safe in a secured Brotherhood building in Chicago, but after arriving in the city and torturing a few more researchers about the trinket, he learned that a researcher by the name of Butch Tiernan had taken it from a demon and now had it in his possession. This human Butch Tiernan has it right now? Dusk asked. Yes, Neve replied. He stepped on the gas pedal and picked up speed. The breeze from the opened passenger's side window tangled Dusk's tawny-colored hair, and even for a wraith, it felt a little too cool to be comfortable with. And how did he manage to steal it from a demon? Does it matter? He has it, Dusk, and once we take it, the researchers will blame it on Demon. And do you think these humans are that stupid to not realize it wasn't Demon who took it? Yes, I think they are extremely stupid. He swerved the car to the left, avoiding a downed branch on the road. They know little to nothing about us, remember? Dusk wasn't so sure about that, and he kept his doubt to himself. We don't have to worry about the Brotherhood or Demon tonight. Niham slowed and pulled the car to the side of the road. Just one researcher. Dusk examined his surrounding environment. He took note of the abundance of trees all around them. It was dark, secluded, and quiet. Sounds of crickets and the occasional car horn in the distance were the only sounds he heard, besides Niham slamming the driver's side door shut. Where are we? We're here. Now, lower your voice. You don't want anyone to hear us, do you? Me? You're the one who just slammed the door. He quietly left the car, and with Niham, they crossed the street and broke through a row of thick bushes. He remained close to Niham, who now crouched as he maneuvered through the dense parts, careful to not trip over the gnarled tree roots at their feet. See the home ahead? He asked in a low whisper. Dusk saw a small, one-story home, which looked more like a backwater juke joint in the deep south than a modest home of a researcher. It had 2 large windows and a wooden door with an enormous dark handle which he could see from where he stood. White smoke billowed from one chimney, and through one window he saw the faint glow of candlelight. Are you sure that is the house, Niham? Yes, I am sure. Dusk still had doubts, and as much as he wanted to turn back, he couldn't let Niham go alone. There was also a tiny part of him that didn't trust Niham with keeping his word and not killing the researcher. It was how he operated. Killing to get what he wanted was a nasty part of him that Dusk never understood. It was better to go along, just to keep him honest and prevent him from doing anything to make the situation worse than it already was. While hunkered, he followed Niham. They avoided stepping on every small branch, leaf, and other piece of forest debris to avoid making any noise. And Dusk kept an eye out, making random sweeps of the area to check for anything or anyone in their immediate vicinity. It was then when he caught the scent of a human nearby, and he tapped Niham on the shoulder to let him know. You just picked up on that? Niham's expression turned to delight. Dusk eyed him suspiciously. I smelled him the moment I stepped out of the car. Your sense of smell is lacking, Dusk. By the way, when was the last time you leeched? It had been days since his hands felt the tingling sensation of human essence being sucked into them. The downside to leeching daily was the small changes to his body, including his stunted senses and strength. He always relished the feeling. He lived for the tingling and flushed skin, to feel the power that surged through his body. What wraith didn't? Maybe after you'll change your mind and we can hunt this researcher for old time's sake. The thought of it almost made Dusk's eyes morph red. No, we're here for this amulet, not to hunt the human. But you need your strength, Niham said as he turned back to look at him. Soon your skin will start rotting. I know what happens. Can we just find this human and get this over with? You know, I never understood why you fight against it. I thought you would have accepted what you are by now. Apparently not. Niham crept ahead, keeping to the shadows, and Dusk followed. The scent of the human became stronger. Ahead, they saw a male with brown and gray hair and brown-rimmed glasses. He wore a white shirt and dark trousers with black suspenders. Remember, we're here for this green amulet. That's it. Dusk whispered to Niham, knowing a human on their own was Niham's favorite kind of meal. It seemed he could hardly contain himself. How could you refuse to leech when there's food this vulnerable and out in the open? Niham was a provocateur. You need to eat, Dusk. There's no getting around that. He also loved the element of surprise, and the moment his victims were put on edge once, he made his move. He delighted in working them into a frenzy before killing them. Who's there? The man's voice sounded raspy and unused. Niham circled around and made a point to step on a branch. The sound of it breaking in two only added to the human's paranoia. Dusk called out to Niham in a panicked whisper, but he didn't listen. The male spoke again. "Hello?" Niham coughed. The guttural half-man, half-human sound that came out of his throat was enough to send the man over the edge. Dusk heard the man's already racing heart accelerate as fear froze him to his spot on the dirt path. When Neve let out a growl, the man spun around in his direction. "Who's there?" he asked again. The human's fear was too hard to ignore. Dusk could taste it in the air. The wraith was raging now to get out. But there was something else in the air. "Wait," he whispered. "I smell something." "I don't. I'm serious. Someone else is here." "I'm not sure if that's fear or cowardice you're exhibiting." "Caution, I remember the last time we did something this risky and I ended up in a cage." "Yes, I know," Niham said, finishing his sentence. "Again, let that go, Dusk. Surely you have forgiven me by now. It's been well over 200 years. "I'm not taking another step." Dusk frowned at the prospect of encountering more than a human in an unfamiliar environment. Just the thought of it was enough to make him hesitate. "Then don't." Unable to maintain his composure, Niham sprinted toward his intended victim, his feet gliding over the ground, but not before Dusk heard rustling leaves on their right. He lifted his face and sniffed again. The thick smell clogged his nostrils and overstimulated his senses. It also triggered his defenses. Something just as fast made contact with Niham before he reached the human. They tumbled along the ground, and the human, now terrified, turned and made a run for the house. Dusk couldn't believe his eyes. Now he stood, frightened, as Niham and their attacker wrestled each other on the dirt path. The human didn't get far when he stopped and turned around to watch the spectacle. With the opportunity to leech still fresh on his mind, Dusk made eye contact with him, lulling his prey into a false sense of security. Just then, the attacker stood. It was a girl who looked no older than 18, with jet-black eyes and sharp fangs a few inches long. It was what Dusk had feared and wanted to avoid. Niham straightened his torn shirt. "Demon." He and the girl began to circle one another. "This one is stronger than she looks." They were inherently stronger than wraiths. That much Dusk knew, but it didn't stop Niham from diving back into the fight with the demon once again. She leapt onto him and clacked her fangs against his raised arms. When they pierced his skin, Niham let out a grunt, and dark blood poured from his wound. Dusk turned his attention away from the frightened human and rushed to Niham, covering the distance between them in less than 3 seconds. He grabbed the demon by the back of her neck and twisted, snapping it violently. Her body went limp, and she fell to the ground. Niham stood and bent forward in exhaustion. "I hope that would have lasted a little longer. I was enjoying our little tussle." "Are you insane?" Angered, Dusk pushed him. "She could have killed you. But she didn't, because you saved me." He placed his hand on Dusk's cheek. Now, with their obstacle down, they turned their eyes toward the human who was halfway down the path, running to the house. "We should go." He tugged on Niham's arm. "If there's one, there's more." He wrestled his arm away. "No, not when I'm so close." Dusk knew Niham wanted to kill another or all of them if he could. He let out a low, frustrated growl, and as his jaw set, his eyes moved to the demon at their feet. "She's not dead." Niham pulled back his arm, and in one quick motion, he punched through the demon's chest. He gruesomely went to work, burrowing his hand deeper until he grabbed her heart and he ripped it from her chest. "Now she's dead." He stared at the bloodied muscle in his hand before dropping it to the ground. What once was a body turned into nothing but a pile of blood, dust, and bone right in front of their eyes. It was vastly different from how a wraith's body reacted at the time of its true death. "I want that amulet," Niham said. "It's mine." Another time, Dusk said as he pulled on Niham's arm again. We must leave. His friend didn't fight back this time, and Dusk managed to pull Niham halfway down the dirt path when another movement on their left grabbed his attention. The bushes rattled, and the scent of yet another demon soon followed. In an instant, Dusk found himself on his back, pinned by his shoulders and face to face with a male who sized him up with darkened eyes. He was thin and rather weak-looking, but Dusk knew that when it came to demon, looks were deceiving. "What is it?" a female voice called from the trees. He expected Niham to come to his rescue, but after hearing the voice of the female demon nearby, he ran away as fast as he could, down the dirt path and out of Dusk's view. It was just like Italy, and now resentful, Dusk screamed obscenities. "It killed Norma," the male demon replied to the female. Dusk shifted his shoulders to break free, but it only made the demon's grip stronger. "It smells weird," the female voice said. "Get to the house, Maris, now." "No, not without you." The human returned, screaming, "No, Aiden, don't kill it, do not kill it." Out of breath, the man gripped his chest. "We can't kill it." He gasped for air. "It killed Norma," Aiden repeated, and his eyes appeared to darken further at his response. "You have no idea how long I've waited to run into one of these." The human bent forward, and Dusk watched him with interested eyes. "Red eyes? Do you see the dark trails underneath its skin? It's a wraith. Dear God, you don't know how rare these things are." "What is it doing here?" Aiden asked. "Did the Brotherhood send it?" No. I doubt they know one is here in Chicago." He adjusted his glasses. "Help me take it to my place. I want to study it." The female demon walked out of the bushes and stood alongside the human and Aiden. Curious, she glimpsed at Dusk. "You can't take that back to your home." Worry overtook her beautiful round face and big brown eyes. Dusk noticed a small and prominent scar on her left cheek. "Then bring it to your sanctuary." Aiden refused. "This thing isn't setting a foot inside our sanctuary." "Well, bring it to my home," the human said again. "I have to study it." Aiden's eyes narrowed. "Why?" The human motioned for Aiden to pick him up. "I already told you, they're rare, and a wraith is spawned from the same source as you both are." "So dark magic is also responsible for this as well? Maybe Ethel sent this one for Maris." Aiden's superb strength surprised Dusk as the demon placed his hand on his throat and lifted him from the ground in one swoop, his feet dangling in the air by inches. Dusk watched as Maris clutched her hand around an object draped around her neck. It was small and green, just like the amulet Niham was after. "No, I doubt anyone sent it." The human caught Dusk's gaze. "I think the wraith and its friend came for that." He pointed at Maris's necklace. The ropes Aiden had tied around Dusk dug into his skin. They circled his entire body, including his neck, wrists, and ankles several times. After Aiden had finished, he chose to remain close by and stood watch, like a guard, over his prisoner. In the corner of the small living room, Dusk watched the human search his desk and other belongings, pulling out pieces of paper and other metal contraptions Dusk had never seen before. He assumed this was the same researcher, Butch Tiernan, who Niham had spoken about. But what he saw didn't make sense. The Brotherhood and their researchers hated Demon. So why was this researcher working with them? He questioned if it had something to do with the amulet around Maris's neck. What was so important about it which allowed both parties to set aside their differences? "I can't read his thoughts," Maris said. "And they can't read yours," Butch responded. "What are you going to do with him exactly?" "Study it," Aiden stated, answering for Butch. "See what makes it tick." He shrugged. "They aren't really the Brotherhood's area of expertise. That role belongs to us." He paced back and forth with his eyes set on Dusk. This thing had the gall to come here with another and kill Norma. They would have killed you too, Butch. Yes. Butch didn't seem bothered. I'm more concerned with why they came for Maris's amulet. You can torture the answer out of him. Personally, I'd rather kill it. Dusk sensed confusion and anger permeating from Aiden, so he held still, thinking the demon was going to kill him at any moment. With how tightly you secured him, Aiden, he's not a threat to anyone here. I want to study him first. By all means, do what you researchers do. After you're done, I am going to kill it. The wall felt cold against Dusk's back. Fighting Aiden had drained him and pushed his body to hunger. He shivered from withdrawal, and the pangs to leech soon followed with his thoughts focused on the desire to have it inside him by any means necessary. Aiden noticed. Something is wrong with him. Dusk tried to lift his head, but his body went against him. He spoke in a frail whisper. If you're going to kill me, kill me. No one is going to kill you. Butch finally approached him, holding a tablet and a pencil in his hand. My name is Butch Tiernan. He studied Dusk with his eyes. Very interesting. Your skin looks like... May I? Don't. Dusk inched back as Butch reached out to touch his forearm. Butch didn't listen. His fingers felt cool to the touch as he rubbed them down to Dusk's wrist and up to his elbow. Butch rotated Dusk's forearm a little to the left, then the right, shortly before he spoke again. You see this? He asked Aiden. This small part. Right there. It looks like it's rotting away. Aiden leaned forward. I see it. His lips shriveled at the sight. Is it contagious? No, I'm not contagious. Dusk slipped his arm from Butch's fingers. I'm hungry. Hungry? Maris asked, while still standing on the other side of the room. Dusk's eyes set on Butch. Humans. Aiden let out a loud laugh. Of course, coming from dark magic, what else would he eat? Can they regurgitate the food like demon? Maris questioned. Perhaps. Butch opened his notepad. I just want to ask a few questions. Get to know more about what you are and what you can do. I am a researcher, after all. First, let's start with your name. I told you mine. Tell me yours. Dusk, and if you promise to let me go, I will tell you whatever you want to know. Dusk? Aiden scoffed. What kind of name is that? Aiden, please, Butch said. And yes, Dusk, I will let you go if you tell me what I want to know. Aiden protested. You can't be serious. He killed one of us. I didn't. That was... Who? Dusk hesitated. What is a researcher from the Brotherhood doing with Demon? I thought you hate them. Different situations call for different approaches. Right now, there's much going on with Demon infighting and the Brotherhood. I don't know anything about that. Well, let me educate you for a moment. I don't care. I want to be let out. I need to get back. To where? He sighed. Please, I can't stay here. I have someone out there who is dependent on me. I have to get back to him. The one who was with you? No, not him. I don't care about him. You cared enough to come here with him to steal this. Maris pointed at her amulet. Dusk turned away. I don't care about that. He does. Who is he? Butch asked. What's his name? How many more are there like you in Chicago? Again, Aiden interrupted the conversation. Please, just let me go. Not until you tell us who your friend is. Aiden replied. Where are you from? How did you become what you are? Who is the other wraith that is dependent on you? Dusk had had enough of his questions. I have to get back. Aiden, please, Butch said again. We need to take this slow. Aiden huffed. We have to know if there are more. They all might be a threat to Maris. There aren't any more, Dusk finally answered. And I didn't know who she was. His eyes moved to Maris. Before I came here, so please just let me go. Does the other one know? Butch asked as he opened his notepad. And what about the other wraith who is dependent on you? Did you make him into what you are? His hunger pains didn't let up, and a sharp pain near his midsection caused him to clench his teeth. I understand how it is to have other people dependent on you. No, you don't. He forced himself to look anywhere else besides their curious faces. On the fireplace, he noticed a picture of Butch standing next to a little boy. That's Devon, Butch said. His parents were Brotherhood researchers. They were killed a few years back. I don't care. He grew impatient. Just let me go. Can you walk in the sun? Aiden asked. Yes. Interesting. Butch jotted in his notepad. But it hurts when I do. Just a little. I assume it would, being from dark magic, he replied. So, why is your friend interested in the amulet? Let me go. I'm not a threat to you. Eventually, Maris walked across the room and joined Butch and Aiden. You haven't said anything to make us believe that. Seeing no other way to avoid their questions, Dusk finally revealed to him the reason why he and Niham came to his home. His name is Niham, and he wants your amulet. Why? I don't know. He can't find the shard, so he thinks by getting that, he'll have some kind of leverage. What shard? Dusk squinted. The shard of Anu. He studied the confused looks on their faces. You don't know what that is, do you? They didn't answer. Of course, why would you? It has nothing to do with Demon. Only wraiths? Butch asked. Dusk nodded. Yes, it hurts us. Upon hearing his explanation, Maris squeezed her amulet. Like this one hurts Demon? Yes, he responded. That was what Niham told me, but you're wearing it around your neck. Yes, she replied. It doesn't hurt the demon who wears it. Dusk tilted his head slightly to the right. So, anyone can wear it? I believe so. That's why Niham wants it, he thought to himself. I told you what I know. Now will you please let me go? I promise that I will leave Chicago, and I won't come back. We can't take that risk, Aiden replied. Protecting Maris is the only thing that matters right now, and you're a risk to her. Dusk turned his attention toward her. I am not. That, I promise you. Maris didn't speak. Instead, she continued to grip her amulet, and her eyes bore into Dusk, as if in deep thought. Maris? Aiden asked. I think... She struggled to find her words. I think we should let him go. Maris, you must understand the position this wraith has placed us in. Aiden, I do, she replied in a soft and unsure voice. Please let him go. I'm not lying when I say to all of you that I will not come back here, Dusk stated, attempting to reassure them again. Oh, I know you aren't. Maris caught her voice. But in letting you go, I'm trusting that you will keep your word and you will leave Chicago. Are you sure? Butch asked. Maris nodded, and Aiden finally gave up in a loud sigh. I guess that's settled, Butch said. Aiden, loosen his ropes, please. Aiden grabbed the rope, and with one vicious pull, he tore it into two. As they loosened, Dusk tossed them to the side and stood slowly. With freedom so close, he limped to the door. If I smell you, Aiden stated. If I see you, you won't. Dusk didn't bother to look over his shoulder at Aiden's stark black eyes. And what about the other? Maris asked. Niham? Dusk stopped just short of the door. He won't, if you force him not to. Dusk made it back to the Pioneer Hotel before morning. He was surprised to find that Tristan didn't leave their rented hotel room while he was gone, even though, as he had stated, he came close to heading to the bar to find out exactly who Dusk had planned to meet. He told Tristan to pack his bags and load the car. He planned on keeping his word and leaving the city that night. But first, he wanted to leave a parting gift for Niham. Of course, leaving was the only thought on his mind. Punching Niham across the face was a close second. They let you go? That's surprising. Yes, Niham. They let me go as long as I promised to never come back to Chicago. I came to tell you that I'm leaving tonight. I see. Niham rubbed his delicate chin. So, did you see it? Did they have the amulet? His response didn't surprise Dusk. No, he lied. They didn't have it, so the researcher who you killed told you the wrong information. That's impossible. Why is that? By the time he told me, he was begging for me to kill him. Still rubbing his chin, he squinted his eyes. You left me, and I'm sorry. Enough with your apologies, Dusk blurted in response. First Italy, and now this? You'd do anything to save your own skin. Just, right now, we need to remain strong. We can't fight among ourselves. We need to be able to rely on each other to survive this. I will not be your guinea pig, Niham. Dusk straightened the collar on his jacket. Not anymore. I'm done with that. I'm done with you. I need that amulet. At what cost? Dusk's eyes beamed down on him. Apparently, leaving me to die wasn't enough. Abandon your obsession about the amulet and the shard before you get yourself killed. You don't understand. You never did. The shard isn't just some random object. It doesn't belong in the hands of anyone but a wraith. And the amulet doesn't belong in the hands of anyone but a demon. Niham paused. So they did have it. Ugh, I can't even look at you. He shook his head in disgust. You saw it, didn't you? Niham placed his hand on Dusk's chest and pushed him back. Tell me. Goodbye, Niham. Dusk walked around him and proceeded across the street and back to the hotel. Don't walk away from me, Niham yelled at him. I am walking away from you. Before he took another step, Niham moved briskly after him. Once close, he took Dusk by the arm. It was as if everything moved in slow motion. Dusk saw every bit of Niham's attack and how swift he moved to drag Dusk right back across the street and pin him against the wall of a nearby building. It was hard enough to almost knock him into unconscious. It felt like the world underneath their feet had shaken. His eyes glowed red in a fiery passion that even Dusk couldn't ignore. It was embarrassing. In one movement, Niham proved how strong he really was. I'm one of the oldest wraiths on this continent. He leaned in closer. You'll do best to remember that. Feeling the pressure on his chest, Dusk gasped. Let me go. So you can run off with your new wraith? Maybe I should find him and kill him. You will not touch him. He held on to Niham's wrist and revealed his own rage and anger by changing the colors of his eyes to match Niham's. You care more for that Tristan boy than you do the one who made you. You love him like you used to love me. When I loved you, it was a necessity for both of us. We were the only two wraiths in Italy at the time. And what about after Italy? When you left me to die at the hands of those soldiers? How many times do I have to apologize for leaving you? He stopped mid-sentence at an aroma that Dusk smelled as well. It came a little earlier than he'd expected. There aren't enough apologies in the world that'll make me forgive what you did to me. The red in Niham's eyes dissipated and he dropped his hand. You didn't. The smell led them to look to their right, down a darkened alley where they witnessed the outline of someone watching them. Dusk stood straight and smoothed his hand through his brown hair. You made me into this, and not once have I felt that you cared about me. So, you led a demon here to get revenge for you. Niham still kept his eye on the shadowy figure. That depends whether you leave the city or not. The figure stepped out of the shadows. As I said, I told them I would leave the city, and I'm going to keep my word. Dusk nodded at Aiden, who now stepped out of the shadows. Look at you, one night with a demon, and you're ready to betray me. Niham laughed. They don't scare me. They should. Dusk backed away from him. They scare me.